right, well everybody, welcome to the Healing School, Class 5. I'm so glad you all are here. And tonight we're going to talk in our first part. We're going to continue on talking about the inner terrain. You know, last week we talked about the inner terrain and how the health of our gut and the health of our immune system was so important to help prevent opportunistic diseases and help prevent diseases from setting up into us. And so we want to continue kind of with talking about how our immune system and our microbiome are ways that, you know, we talked about detoxification and acid-alkaline balances to being ways to help get our inner terrain healthy. But tonight I want to expound on the effects of sugar on the microbiome and on our internal terrain, because literally it is the worst thing you can put in your body. Ann-Louise Gittleman, I mentioned her in previous talks, mentions how sugar literally is the #1 toxin that we need to get out of our diets. And so she calls it the #1 toxic invader in her book, How to Stay Young and Healthy in a Toxic World. And she said that there's over 60 ailments that have been associated with sugar consumption in the medical literature. They include the following, and I'm not listing them all as it would take too long, but here's just a few. Addictions, adrenal gland exhaustion, you don't want that. Premature aging and wrinkling, so ladies, really, if you want to prevent wrinkles, sugar is a key factor. Alcoholism, allergies, anxiety, arthritis, asthma, behavior problems, as well as a lack of concentration, depression, mood swings, Alzheimer's disease. They're calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes because the sugar is affecting the brain. And then yeast overgrowth like candida, all of your heart disease issues such as high cholesterol and high triglycerides, coronary artery disease, high blood pressure, skin issues like dermatitis, eczema, psoriasis, and then bone loss and osteoporosis, again the joints, tooth decay, cataracts, and a lot of other vision problems, gallstones, hormonal problems, fatigue, liver dysfunction, and then of course obesity, diabetes, and hypoglycemia. So those are just a few things that sugar causes and contributes to. Almost all of the degenerative diseases that plague us today were practically non-existent 250 years ago when sugar consumption averaged about 20 pounds per person per year. Today, the average American, consumes 150 pounds of sugar per person per year, or about 32 teaspoons of sugar a day, making it over 25% of our caloric intake. And this is way too high. These numbers came out in February 2015. And when I talk about sugars, I'm talking about, of course, the refined white sugar that we all know, but it's also, when you look at a label, it will be listed like sucrose, fructose, glucose, dextrose, anything ending in OSE, honey, maple syrup, brown sugar, corn sweetener, and high fructose corn syrup, just to name a few. And also what we would call on the sugar list are refined carbohydrates, such as refined carbohydrates are things that break down quickly into sugar so fast that it's almost the same as if you were eating sugar. So refined carbohydrates would be products made with white flour, anything made with white flour. So pastas, breads, crackers, pastries. These you might as well just be eating sugar because they break down so quickly and they affect insulin response so quickly that your body treats it as if it's a simple sugar. So, you know, in our diets we have complex carbohydrates. These would be things like your vegetables and legumes and beans and fruits, things like that. And then you have your simple carbohydrates, which would be some of the things I'm talking about here. But they all of them break down into the 3 smallest molecules or smallest units of glucose, fructose, and galactose. So a lot of people erroneously believe, well, it doesn't matter. If it all breaks down to those 3 simple monosaccharides, then what difference does it make what the source is if it's going to all break down. But because we think, well, a sugar is a sugar, right? Wrong. What is overlooked in this incorrect assumption is the importance of the fiber in the food, of a complex carbohydrate, the presence of other essential nutrients, the rate of the release of sugar in the digestive tract, the amount of insulin that is secreted in response, and the absorption rate into the blood and the resulting insulin secretion. So all of these factors play a role in whether, how the sugar is going to affect you. Because natural unrefined carbohydrates naturally have fiber. They're naturally surrounded with protein or fats or minerals that are needed in the breakdown. Whereas refined carbs are toxic to the body because they don't have these things. The degree of toxicity for a carbohydrate depends on the degree of refinement. So for instance, whole wheat is non-toxic unless you're allergic to it. But white flour, which has been refined, will be more like a toxin in the body. So everything that's made with white flour, because when they strip it and refine it, they've removed all the nutrients, they've removed everything from it, and it's just now a pure starch. Hello, ladies, come in. So, in the refining process, a lot of the important minerals are stripped, such as chromium, manganese, cobalt, copper, zinc, and these are nutrients that you need in order to help digest this food and to protect your body from it. So what it has to do then is it has to pull from your own reserves of minerals to break them down. So where do those reserves come from? Your bones and your teeth and your muscles and other tissues that have magnesium and these minerals in them. Did you know that by eating sugar, it increases the rate at which you excrete calcium? And another interesting thing is they can take blood samples and measure how much calcium is in your blood. Then have you consume some sugar and wait a little while and take your blood again and your blood calcium level goes up. Well, why would that be? Because there's no calcium in sugar. But what it's doing is it's pulling calcium and magnesium from your bones and teeth to balance out the sugar. And they also can do before and after urine tests. Again, they find that after you've eaten sugar, they can do a urine test again afterwards, and they'll find you're excreting that calcium more than you were before. Again, because it's pulling it, robbing it from your bones and teeth and muscles, and then excreting it. So sugar is a major contributor to, again, osteoporosis and bone loss and tooth decay. What happens is, if your minerals are not in the proper ratio with each other, then the body can't use them effectively. And any excess then becomes toxic to the body. And it contributes to things like bone spurs, cataracts, gallstones, hardening of the arteries, arthritis, kidney stones, and tooth plaque. So again, we've got to cut the sugar down. Sugar throws the body chemistry out of homeostasis, and just 1 to 2 teaspoons is all that's needed to upset the mineral balance. And soft drinks are the worst offenders in this regard, because not only do you have the sugar in a soft drink, this is a 10 ounce, if you can see, has this much sugar in it, but then the other thing that soft drinks have in them is phosphoric acid, which again, the phosphoric acid is very acidic, and it's high in phosphorus, so again, you're messing up your calcium to phosphorus ratio and throwing everything out of balance. So your bones and teeth, again, are going to be leached out. They're going to leach out and get into the bloodstream and then excreted. There was a dentist, Dr. Melvin Page. He's a very famous dentist who studied cultures all around the world in regards to their teeth. And he noticed that when he could get a patient's calcium to phosphorus ratio correct, to the 10 to 4 ratio, I'm assuming 10 parts calcium to 4 parts phosphorus, that tooth decay and bone loss, as well as many other negative symptoms, would simply go away. A cavity might be in the developmental stage, and it'll just stop growing. The cavity will just stop. And so he found that if he can get this ratio correct, that tooth decay would stop. There's another British researcher, Dr. John Yudkin. He literally spent his adult life studying the effects of sugar on cultures all over the world. And he states that sugar consumption is one of the leading causes of atherosclerosis, which is blockaging of the arteries, and coronary heart disease. He wrote a book, Sweet and Dangerous, and in that book, Dr. Yudkin cited numerous examples of a variety of societies that showed that sugar was a more likely cause of heart disease than fat. And he gave lots of examples, but the Maasai and Samburu tribes of East Africa have almost no heart disease, and yet they consume a high diet of meat and fat, but no sugar, almost no sugar. Then there's Dr. Cleve. He did a famous study called he wrote a book called The Saccharine Disease, and he showed convincing evidence that most of our modern diseases were virtually non-existent in primitive cultures where they didn't have sugar until about 20 years after those groups started eating sugar. About 20 years later, they would start showing all the same signs that we did. Now, another researcher, Dr. Campbell, has developed 3 sugar rules which explain the relationship of sugar to humans. So the first rule is the rule of 20 years, which means that an individual can resist the ravages of sugar consumption for 20 years before diabetes and all these diseases start setting in. Well, I don't know about you, but I have a feeling my 20 years are up. I may be on borrowed time here. And then the rule of 20 pounds, meaning that a nation can consume up to 70 pounds of sugar per person per year before showing the major physiological breakdown among its population. So that should be the rule of 70 pounds, not 20 pounds. So the rule of 70 pounds, you can consume up to 70 pounds without having a lot of major issues. But what do we consume? 150. So we're twice that. And then there's the rule of 20%, which means that your intake of sugar into your diet, if at least it's only 20% of the total calories, you're probably going to be okay, but we are at 25%. So in every way, we're breaking all the rules. And you know what happens when you break the rules? You get in trouble. Now, one study I'd like to point out that really shows how sugar suppresses our immune system. And again, our immune system is our best friend. You don't want to do anything that's going to cripple your immune system. That inner terrain that we talked about last week being so important is a classic case here. So I want to tell you about a study that was done where they divided the groups into 5 groups. And the first group, I'm going to see if I can write this on the board and hopefully it'll show up. The first group was the control group, and they got 0 grams of sugar, no sugar in the diet. And then the next group got 6 teaspoons of sugar, then 12 teaspoons of sugar, then 18 teaspoons, and another group, the 5th group, got 24 grams of sugar. Teaspoons of sugar. So, y'all probably can't see that because I'm in the way. Then what would happen, they would take blood from these groups, and over a period of 24 hours, blood samples were taken from each group over a period of 5 hours and incubated with Staphylococcus bacteria. When viewed under a microscope, each white blood cell in the control group that had no sugar could engulf an average of 14 bacteria. So your immune system, those white blood cells go and they gobble up 14 different bacteria. But the group that got the 6 teaspoons of a sugar drink could only engulf 10 bacteria. The group that got 12 could only engulf 5.5 bacteria. The group that got 18 teaspoons of sugar could only engulf 2, and the group that got 24 could only engulf 1 bacteria in 5 hours. So that's how sugar cripples your immune system. And the greatest immune suppressing effect occurred within 1 to 2 hours of eating the sugar, but again, it did last up to 5 hours. So, the moral of the story, if you're sick, don't eat sugar. Not even orange juice has too much sugar in it. And I told a friend this one time who had been really sick, deathly ill with one of those flus that just really put you down for a long time. And she finally broke it and started feeling human again, that she might live. And she was hungry and wanted to eat, so she ate a bowl of ice cream. she ended up getting right back sick, went right back to bed, and got sick all over again. So she was fully convinced that this was true. Now I want to tell you a story about some Eskimos. This is a true story. But I'll preface it with this. Imagine that the number of diabetics in your community increases 400% in 10 years. 5 times as many men over 40 developed blocked arteries. A once rare operation is now performed frequently, and all of the teenagers begin suffering from a skin disease that had not ever been seen before. And worst of all, a new type of cancer was appearing among the women of this community. Well, these events exactly happened to a group of Eskimos that lived in northern Canada. What happened was the United States built radar stations and defense stations up there in the Canadian Arctic so they could watch what was coming over, I guess, from Russia. I don't know. But anyway, so they built these radar stations and airports and things. So the men, the native men, instead of being able to hunt for their food and gather, roots and berries and things like this, they started eating in the cafeteria that was built to house them. So they actually literally abandoned their way of living and ate the same foods that's in our supermarket. They built them a nice big supermarket with all the fast foods, the 4 basic food groups that we have: the frozen, canned, bottled, and bagged. And they began eating everything we did. And in less than 1 generation, nearly the entire population changed from a native way of life to a modern way of life like what we have here. So before the 1950s, their diet consisted of fish, caribou, fowl, polar bear, rabbit, fox. Vegetables included roots, leafy greens, seaweed, and occasional berries. But by the mid-1960s, now they lived on base. They're at the defense installation or airstrip. Food and clothing were bought in stores, just like what we have here. And so the men no longer hunted and grew their food. And the women also, instead of gathering berries or hunting for roots or things like this, they stayed at home and ate chocolates and sugars and kind of do what we do, drinking a lot of Coke, a lot of soft drinks. Well, Dr. Otto Schaefer, he's an internal medicine specialist who investigated and actually documented all the things that happened to this group of people. Reported that their protein dropped to less than half of what it was, making room for half of their calories to come from refined carbohydrates, especially sugar, which quadrupled from what they had been eating. So it's not surprising that diabetes tripled in 10 years or increased 400%, and cardiovascular disease increased 5-fold. What do you reckon the rare operation was that had never been performed in the only hospital they had where everybody went if they got sick? Well, they'd never even performed gallbladder surgery. Now they had to build 2 more hospitals, and they're performing as many gallbladder surgeries there as we have here in America. And of course, dentists had to be flown in. They didn't even have one. And then the skin condition that all the teenagers got, acne. So it's pretty interesting now. And then the same process has been witnessed in the Maori Pacific Islanders and Yemenite Jews that would immigrate to Israel and would eat more of sugar. They just didn't have sugar much where they were. And they also had these same statistics happen to them. So, if that doesn't kind of tell you what sugar in our modern diet is doing to us, I don't know what could. And then, of course, the main thing that most of us are interested in is how it causes weight gain. So let's talk about that. Any carbohydrate that quickly breaks down into the simple sugars goes to the bloodstream, where it should be burned for energy. The insulin should be secreted to get that sugar out of the blood and into the cell where you burn it for energy. And then if you don't quite burn it all for energy, it could be stored in the muscle as glycogen for later use. However, because of the excessive amounts that a person eats when they eat sugar, what happens is a lot of insulin is secreted, but you can't burn it all up. And the stores are limited, and as far as glycogen goes, there's only a limited amount that can be stored in the muscle. So the rest gets stored as body fat. And the more refined or carbs or sugar you eat, the more insulin is released to take those sugars out of the bloodstream and turn it into fat. Insulin by itself will cause you to gain weight with no extra eating required. So insulin, even though it's crucial we have it, ask any type 1 diabetic, you have to have insulin to live, but at the way we're doing it, it is not our friend anymore. It has become our enemy as far as losing weight goes and keeping us from gaining weight. So again, it will cause extra weight on you even without extra eating. What they've done is they would take a group of rats, 2 groups of rats, and they would feed them and exercise them the exact same amount. But then they would take one group and inject insulin into them, and they would just gain weight like crazy. They would get really large. They became very fat. And so that it's basically doing the same thing to us. Excess insulin is causing us to put on fat. And one of the ways that it does that is, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me back up. Insulin is an essential hormone that allows the cells of your body to take in and burn energy, sugar for energy. And if you don't have enough, again, type 1 diabetes is the result. But there's another form of diabetes, type 2 diabetes or adult onset diabetes, which is what happens with that is the cells become resistant to insulin. So you're making insulin, but your cells are resistant. It's kind of like knocking on the door and the cells won't let insulin do its job of getting sugar out of the blood and into the cell. And so it's resistant, so the sugar stays in the blood. And so then you have high blood sugar. So then more insulin is secreted to say, hey, let us in. And again, the cells are resistant, so they won't let it in. And then you have this vicious cycle of more insulin causing all of those calories to go to fat storage. And the deal is every overweight person has some insulin resistance going on just by virtue of the fact you're overweight. And then the more you're overweight, the more insulin resistant you are. The more insulin resistant you are, the more you're liable to gain weight, the harder it is to lose weight. The heavier you are, the more insulin resistant you become. You can see that it's just this vicious cycle. So the only way, there are things you can take to help your cells not be insulin resistant. Chromium is very good. Alpha lipoic acid is a very important nutrient that can help your cells become sensitive to insulin again. Berberine is another very wonderful product that you can take to help with insulin resistance. So anyone, again, if you've got a weight problem, these are things you could take that will help your cells accept that insulin and get that sugar into the cell. And this condition, if you have insulin resistance, they're calling it pre-diabetes because literally you're just one step away from becoming a diabetic. Even though some say you're either diabetic or you're not, but there is this stage where you're just borderline. It's kind of a borderline diabetes. And so we don't want to live there. We want to get away from that. And so another thing that happens, and this is another way why insulin increases weight gain, is because when insulin is present, your body can't release glucagon. So glucagon is a hormone that helps take the fat stores and release the fat cells to be burned for energy. But if insulin is present, glucagon is not present. So if you want glucagon to release fat stores, you've got to get insulin levels down to a reasonable amount. And so, again, the end result is if you have too much insulin, you get more body fat and an inability to store or to burn the stored fat. And that's just what we all want, right? So, and then again, the overweight person, because he's not using this for energy, he becomes tired and he becomes hungry. Insulin makes you hungry. And so then if you eat, you're probably not eating the right things because you feel like you need sugar because you're having hypoglycemic symptoms, your blood sugar is going too low. And it's kind of a no-win situation. So we really need to keep the insulin levels down by keeping our sugars and refined carbs down. Again, refined carbs can be anything made with white flour as well. Your pastas, your bagels, your cookies, your crackers. Now, another thing that happens with insulin, some other things that can affect insulin, besides sugar, is caffeine. Caffeine is a strong insulin stimulator. Yeah, this is sad news. This may be due to a direct insulin stimulation or as a result of high levels of sugar released into the blood when caffeine is ingested. And then eating irregular meals. Long periods with no eating seems to interfere with glucose metabolism by increasing insulin resistance. So you want to make sure you're eating regular meals and getting protein in all of those meals to stabilize the sugars you are eating in that meal. An interesting study done in England a few years ago divided a large group of men into those eating 1 meal a day, those eating 2 meals a day, and those eating 3 or more meals a day. The study showed that those eating 1 meal a day had more insulin resistance than those eating several meals a day. Incidentally, those eating 1 meal a day were also heavier and had higher cholesterol levels as well. Adele Davis also tells of studies done on rats that ate only 1 meal a day and how they were obese compared to the rats that could eat at will whatever they wanted. So, we think we're doing good by eating 1 meal a day, but really you're kind of messing up your insulin resistance. And then lack of exercise can cause insulin resistance, but the reverse is true. Exercise helps, insulin resistance. It reduces it. So exercise is very good to lose weight. That's another reason it does. Besides just burning calories, it helps with insulin resistance. And then I mentioned how it seems like the heavier you are, the more insulin resistant you become. And it says that large fat cells in obese people somehow produce insulin resistance. As the fat cell size is reduced with a weight management program, insulin resistance decreases. And then again, trace mineral deficiency. So I mentioned how sugar steals a lot of these nutrients. But taking these nutrients can help reduce high insulin levels. Dr. Joel Wallach, I don't know if y'all remember him from the Dead Doctors Don't Lie stuff. He tells how they can induce a diabetic condition in animals by depriving them of chromium and vanadium. Then by giving them the minerals back, the diabetic condition resolves. Dr. Joel Wallach, W-A-L-L-A-C-H. Dead Doctors Don't Lie. That is a fascinating stuff if you ever get a chance to hear him. Okay, so then hormones, such as estrogen and adrenal hormones, seem to cause some insulin resistance. Cortisone, in particular, often brings on diabetes in those with borderline diabetes. So, people who are on steroids have allergies or whatever, and they're taking cortisone, they're increasing their insulin resistance. And then, believe it or not, a low complex carbohydrate intake. So some people in their desire to lose weight, they just cut out all carbs. And this is not good because that actually increases insulin resistance as well. So we don't want to avoid them altogether. We just want to avoid the simple carbohydrates, but we do want to eat the vegetables and the beans and the nuts and the seeds and the whole grains and the legumes. These are healthy nutrients that that we need. They have fiber in them, they have nutrients we need, and they will not break down quickly into the body. Therefore, they don't cause an insulin problem. Now, one way to find out just how quickly any food breaks down into sugar is by looking at the glycemic index. I'm sure all of y'all have heard that, and if not, you have a paper. You should have been handed a paper that has the glycemic index on it. It will look like this. And so you can look at, like the very first one here, puffed rice. Basically, if you look at just straight up sugar, it's scored as 100. So the highest you would think would be 100, right? But puffed rice actually has a rapid secretion of insulin, and it's scored at 133. So it's it turns faster into sugar than sugar does. Your rice cakes, your puffed wheat, breakfast cereals, all are actually worse than just straight up glucose. White bread is at 100. Potatoes are 98. Carrots are 92. But again, your potatoes and carrots have fiber, they have minerals, they have nutrients, they break down slower, so they don't cause as quickly a insulin secretion. But you can look at that, and ideally, if you can go over here to the reduced insulin secretion side, the right side of the paper, and focus more on those foods, or anything probably under 60, 50 to 60, somewhere in there. 40 to 49 maybe. I don't know. You do what you want to lose weight there, but that kind of tells you how quickly these foods turn into sugar. And so we want to just try to stay away from the high glycemic index and go to the lower ones. Okay.
Ice cream would be 36. That must be a diet ice cream.
Is ice cream 36? I wonder if it's because of the protein that's in it. Dairy products have protein, and protein, they tell you if you want to lose weight, if anytime you eat a carbohydrate, eat some protein with it. And it will dramatically slow down how fast that turns to sugar and how much it affects your insulin. So this one diet I semi-follow, they say protein with every snack, every carbohydrate. You eat protein with it. And so I think that's maybe why ice cream is lower. Now I want to talk a little bit about soft drinks because this is where we're getting a lot of our sugar. However, wait a minute, I wonder if I got ahead of myself. I want to show you this thing I have here. I've been showing this for years and it's kind of getting old. But this is the amounts of hidden sugar. So again, when we talked about the average American consuming 150 pounds of sugar, a lot of people think, well, I'm not eating that much. I'm not eating 750 donuts a year or drinking 60 gallons of soft drinks a year. But it's the number one food additive. You take all the other food additives combined together and they don't equal how much sugar is added to our food. So it's in everything. Pork and beans has 5 teaspoons. A 16-ounce cola, 12 teaspoons. A piece of chocolate cake that's iced, 10 teaspoons. Ice cream has 6 teaspoons for 1 cup. A donut has 6 teaspoons. And so you can kind of see if you have, let's say you're going to a birthday party. What do we have? A big old piece of cake, 2 scoops of ice cream, a Coke. Oh my gosh, we're in sugar overload. Big time. Just think what that's doing to our mineral balance and our inner terrain and feeding the yeast and causing us to gain weight and clogging our arteries. I mean, we're probably not going to completely cut it out for the average person, but you can greatly cut that back. You don't have to have a big piece. You don't have to have 2 scoops of ice cream. You don't have to drink that, So there's ways of not totally depriving yourself. And yet not killing yourself either. So, but again, the average American drinks 60 gallons of soft drinks a year. Now somebody's drinking my share because I don't do that. I don't drink soft drinks very much. And again, one can of soda is 10 teaspoons. But who drinks a can? Most of the Big Gulp and the Toss-Ups and free refills. I mean, you're just getting way more than that, not to mention the caffeine that's in them, not to mention the artificial colors and sulfites and other things that's in there. So let's look at a few more things that's in soft drinks. Again, high fructose corn syrup, which by now I hope you've all heard that is way worse than sugar ever thought about being. Milton, if you want to sit right here, you can help me monitor that. So high fructose corn syrup is actually far worse for you than sugar. Now, I did notice in the store the other day that they have a soft drink out now that's not got high fructose corn syrup in it. It's got cane sugar, and then it's half stevia as well. And so I'm like, well, if a person did have to have something like that, that would be a step up. That would be an improvement. But there's a lot of other things in soft drinks that are bad for us, and I'm going to look at a few of them. So one of them, phosphoric acid. Again, causes that mineral ratio balance to get upset and causes you to leach calcium out of your bones and teeth and have osteoporosis. And then we have the sugar that causes the increase in insulin. If you're drinking diet, we're going to talk about aspartame here in a minute, but aspartame is no good. There's over 92 different health side effects associated with aspartame consumption, the NutraSweet, including brain tumors, birth defects, diabetes, emotional disorders, epilepsy, seizures, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. And then there's the caffeine. Caffeine can cause jitteriness, insomnia, anxiety, irregular heartbeat, high cholesterol levels, vitamins and mineral depletion, breast lumps, birth defects, and some forms of cancer. So that's the caffeine. Literally everything in a soft drink is designed to ruin your health. There's just not even one redeeming thing about it. I mean, not anything. It's, if you could pick a poison, to kill yourself with, it would probably be the best one you could pick. So clearly the overconsumption of sodas and sweet drinks is one of the leading causes of obesity and every other ailment known to man. There was an independent peer-reviewed study published in the British medical journal, The Lancet, that demonstrated a strong link between soda consumption and childhood obesity. They found that 12-year-olds who drank soft drinks regularly were more likely to be overweight than those who didn't. And here's another sobering fact: if you're struggling with weight issues, just one extra can of soda per day can add as much as 15 pounds to your weight over the course of a single year. One soda per day increases your risk of diabetes by 85%. Soda drinkers have the highest cancer risk. While the federal limit for benzene in drinking water is 5 parts per billion, researchers have found benzene levels as high as 79 parts per billion in some soft drinks. And of the 100 brands tested, most had at least some detectable level of benzene present. Maybe that's why it's causing cancer. Soda has been shown to cause DNA damage, courtesy of the sodium benzoate, a common preservative found in soft drinks, and it's able to switch off vital parts of your DNA. So if you're drinking soda still, stop it. Pure water is a much better choice. You need water. We're going to talk about water one of these days, how important that is and what it can do for you. So there's absolutely no reason you or your kids should ever have a soda. None, zip, nada, nothing, no excuses. If you're doing it, know full well that you're hurting yourself if you do. Here's exactly what happens when you assault your body with a can of Coke. Within the first 10 minutes, 10 teaspoons of sugar hit your system. This is 100% of your recommended daily intake. And the only reason you don't vomit as a result of the overwhelming sweetness is because the phosphoric acid cuts the flavor. Within 20 minutes, your blood sugar spikes and your liver responds to the resulting insulin burst by turning massive amounts of sugar into fat. Within 40 minutes, caffeine absorption is complete. Your pupils dilate, your blood pressure rises, and your liver dumps more sugar into your bloodstream. Around 45 minutes, your body increases dopamine production, which is kind of the reason we drink it, right? And to get that pleasure center. It's a physically identical response to that of heroin. And after 60 minutes, you'll have a sugar crash and you'll feel terrible. And then what do? We'll grab for something else sweet and we'll start all over again. So, giving up sugar is hard. I'll be the first to tell you, it's hard. But don't be tempted to use aspartame as a sugar substitute. The use of aspartame has grown astronomically in the United States. By 1985, 800 million pounds of aspartame were consumed in the U.S. alone. It's estimated that over 100 million people drink aspartame-sweetened drinks, including a large percentage of children. It's also worth noting that the first experiments done to test the safety of aspartame before its final approval in 1981 disclosed a high incidence of brain tumors in the animals fed NutraSweet. In this study, 12 of the aspartame-fed rats developed brain tumors, while none of the control groups did. This represented a rate that was 25 times higher than normal. Yet it still got approved by the FDA. And, not surprising, stevia got banned. About 5 years after NutraSweet was on the market, stevia was banned from use in America to sweeten things with. Why would the FDA want to ban something safe that's been proven to be safe while letting something that's been proven to be harmful on the market? Money. An interesting thing is that Monsanto, one of the FDA officials that was instrumental in getting NutraSweet on the market, later went on to work for Monsanto. So follow the money, We think the government's out to protect our health, but when it comes to money, things change. There's a book called Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills, written by a neurosurgeon, Dr. Blaylock, and he shows that NutraSweet and MSG, which is another very toxic thing to the body, are toxic to the neurons in the brain, not only causing them to become extremely excited, but can cause them to degenerate and die. And these excitotoxins are major contributors to diseases like Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's, Alzheimer's. Why is NutraSweet so bad? Because, the marketing campaign for them is that, well, they have phenylalanine and aspartic acid in them. That's what's found in a banana, right? So how can it be harmful? Well, when it's ingested, it's converted into two compounds, formaldehyde and formic acid, both cancer-causing chemicals. More than 75% of all non-drug complaints to the FDA concern aspartame. Now, if that was an herb, it would be so off the market. At least 70 different symptoms and 5 deaths have been reported to result from its use. Consumer complaints include gastrointestinal symptoms, headaches. Notice how many of these have to do with the brain. Headaches, rashes, depression, seizures, memory loss, blurred vision, slurred speech, and other neurological disorders, even those mimicking MS. We knew of a lady who started having symptoms of MS, and when her sister heard about aspartame causing symptoms that mimic MS, she called and told her, "Are you drinking diet drinks?" And, "Oh yeah, lots of them every day." Stop it and see what happens. And she, sure enough, got better. So this is something to look at if you know of anyone that's having neurological problems. So I don't know how much I want to go into the details of how much, the mechanisms whereby it converts. Let's just recap here. In humans, the methyl alcohol, what happens is again, it turns into formaldehyde and formic acid. But there's also, the phenylalanine has been synthetically modified to carry a methyl group. The phenylalanine methyl bond is called a methyl ester, and it basically becomes a methyl alcohol. It travels through the blood vessels into sensitive areas such as your brain, which converts the methanol to formaldehyde. And since there's no catalase present to detoxify it, the formaldehyde is free to cause enormous damage to your tissues. Some of the other things, ear buzzing, dizziness, nausea, vertigo, chills, numbness and shooting pains in the extremities, behavioral disorders, and neuritis are some more things. And then vision problems, a lot of vision problems, blurring of vision, retinal damage, blindness. Man, this stuff just isn't any good. Formaldehyde is a known carcinogen that causes retinal damage, interferes with DNA replication, and may cause birth defects. So, you don't want to do the diet stuff. But, there's good news in that there is stevia on the market now. Finally, all these years later, stevia gets to come back on the market as a sweetener. And actually, when it first came back, you couldn't call it a sweetener. They wouldn't let you use that term, but now it seems to be okay. And I have samples here of stevia that I'd love for everybody to take. Harold, do you want to just take the box and kind of pass it around, let everybody grab several? This brand of stevia, the New Naturals brand, in my opinion, is the best tasting brand out there. I've tried several brands. This is the one I like, but there are several brands on the market. Find one that you like. We do sell all kinds of stevia. We have it in liquid extracts. We have them flavored if you want to make a flavored drink. They come with flavors too. And again, the stevia is very safe. It's actually been proven to be beneficial for diabetics. It's been used for hundreds of years as a sweetener in South America and has had wide commercial use in Japan since 1970, where it's put in everything from soft drinks to soy sauce. So that's pretty much all I have on the sugar. Went longer than I thought. Do you have any questions or comments? Have I scared you? Honey is definitely better than sugar because it does have minerals in it. Again, if you're trying to lose weight, you would want to keep that to maybe 1 or 2 teaspoons a day at the most. But it's definitely better than refined sugars. Any other questions?
I'd like to say something about the stevia.
Okay.
It's, these packets is not as good as a pure powder because they have to cut this with something. It's such a small amount of the stevia, you can't get it out of the package unless you put maltodextrin or whatever they put in this.
Yeah, maltodextrin.
To make the package easier. But then there's a liquid stevia that we use, just, it's a liquid, she carries it in first. And it works, to me, it works better than the powder.
Yeah.
Different people have different ideas.
And hopefully, as demand increases or as people stop buying the other, this could change. So
About an 8-ounce glass of tea or something, this sweet.
one or two of them, depending on how sweet you like things, it might take two because again, it is cut with that maltodextrin, so it might take a couple of them. But yeah, try it and see if you like it. It's, to me, some people complain stevia is bitter. This one is not bitter at all. So it just might be a little too sweet for your taste because it is 300 times sweeter than sugar. So a little bit does go a long way.